What's up? My name is Casey. This is the Oracle Podcast, and today I have some amazing guests with me. I have some amazing co-oracles. I have Heath, Rowan, and Foster from the Franchise Paradiso podcast. What's up, guys?
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys so much for making the time to come on. So these guys have an amazing podcast where they talk about all things franchise movies. They break them down in excruciating detail because, as they say, we don't get as much original content anymore, and Hollywood just doesn't want to give it to us. So we bask in the franchises that we are force-fed.
Wow, you've memorized it. That's I haven't even memorized that.
That was not as good as it could have been. So these guys are part of the Sif Pop umbrella as far as that goes, but these guys are awesome in their own regards. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about how you got started in loving movies and a little bit about your podcast as well?
I think Heath should go first.
I was just going to say Heath should start because you're the reason the podcast started. So I figure you can.
Okay, I guess.
He said reluctantly.
I mean, I think that it was kind of a brainchild of all of us. Yeah, so my name's Heath. I am the old of the group, and so I have been into movies longer than these guys have been alive, which is horrifying. I remember, that's true. I remember really starting to get into movies in the mid-90s, beyond the scope of just, hey, what new Disney movie is coming out this year? Really, when Titanic came out in 97, that's when I started falling in line with following the Oscars and award season and movies on a bigger scale than I ever had before. I remember watching that Oscars ceremony and it just kind of changing my trajectory of how I felt about film as an art. Going into the 2000s when the Facebook came out, before they dropped I started posting small diatribes and reviews on Facebook. And I kind of just did that off and on for the better part of 15, 20 years. And then during the pandemic, when we were all trapped at home, I was like, I really want to dive into this more as like a side profession and write more full time. I love it as a creative outlet. I love it as a way of educating myself and exploring things. And I joined Sif Pop, and I've been writing regular articles for them ever since. I watch a ton of movies, way more than is natural and or healthy. And the podcast came from, I think it was Foster and I texting one night, like having a debate about horror movies and horror franchises and what the best horror franchise was. And then we broke that down as, well, you can't just say best franchise because there's so many different parts. What's the best killer? Who's the best final girl? And then we texted Rowan about it and said, what's your thoughts on this conversation? And then we decided we should make a podcast about it. And then it was just going to be one episode, like a one shot. And then we're like, well, maybe we should do each episode for best killer, best final girl, best kill, etc. And then that led to the whole series as it is. We do new seasons based on different genres. We've done horror, we've done comics and superheroes. Currently, we're doing action adventure. We have comedy on the horizon, sci-fi, fantasy on the horizon. Who knows how long I can torture Rowan and Foster and convince them to keep doing this. So that's me, and someone else gets to talk now.
What about you, Foster?
I mean, as far as just getting into movies, I would say when I was younger, it was Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and probably the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans. I would say those are like the three big ones where I just watched them obsessively when I was younger. And then that evolved into me just trying to cross lots of movies off my watch list. Like I remember when I was finally allowed to watch R-rated movies, and then all of a sudden there's like this huge wave of movies I can see now that are considered classics, and it just is never ending, and it still has not ended, and they keep making more. So I feel like it's just a never-ending journey for me to try to watch every movie I possibly can. But yeah, and then kind of like Heath, like around the pandemic time, we all sort of separately signed up for Sif Pop, and that's how we got to know each other. Even before this podcast started, that we have together. And Rowan and I actually discovered that Rowan goes to college like 5 minutes from me. It was this kind of crazy coincidence because you could see the location in the Slack chat. And I messaged him and I was like, sorry to be a creep, but like, do you live in this town? Because it's a tiny little town and it's like 5 minutes from me. And then we started meeting up in person. And then eventually Heath came to visit New York at one point, and we've since come to visit Heath in St. Louis. And I don't know, it's just kind of a cool, happy family thing that has sort of sprung from there. There's a lot of nice community, I think, amongst the Sif Pop people, even beyond us three.
Awesome. And what about you, Rowan?
Well, I'm glad we went in this order because I'm the baby of the group. I'm the one of the trio born in the 21st century, and
Weirdo.
yeah, no, I know. I'm the outlier. In terms of I basically grew up surrounded by like a love for like cult movies that I inherited from my father, who would have shown me Evil Dead when I was 5 if he could have. He could not, and so I did not see it when I was 5. But he just had so many discs. He loved horror movies. I would occasionally walk in on him watching something that I was definitely not allowed to see, and that kind of got me fascinated with the idea of like what like I guess that is where my idea of what a movie could be came from. And I feel like that's not the experience that most people have. But I'm also the older sibling, and so I was not allowed to watch R-rated movies for quite a long time. And so I had to find my own avenues into doing that. And then when I was allowed to watch whatever I wanted, COVID happened just like less than 5 years after that. And that basically just opened the floodgates for anything and everything. Similar to Heath and Foster, I think I came to Sif Pop a little bit later than they did, but kind of a part of the same wave of people. And yeah, as they've said, we connected. And it is funny that Heath says that Franchise Paradiso is the brainchild of all three of us, because I did come to it from them. But I'm so glad that they brought it to me. I don't know why I was the one that they brought it to, but I have had just like such a blast over these like 3.5 years, just talking movies with them, and I would consider them some of my best friends. And I don't know if I've ever told them that to their faces, but it's true.
Well, you still haven't because this is video.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Very true.
True.
Also, when you said you walked in on your dad and saw things you weren't supposed to see, I thought that sentence was going in a very different direction.
Well, that just goes to show you where your head's at, Heath.
I guess that's true.
That's awesome. But before we
Womp womp for
move
me.
on to our talk about, we're here. This is the Oracle podcast. I love Greek mythology. I love all things about Greek mythology. We're going to talk about the Odyssey today. But before we move on to that, there is one man who is a master at quick shout outs, at quick plugs, as it were. And so I'm going to let the master do their work.
Oh my gosh. I wish I had known you were going to do this, because then I could have prepped something funnier. Oh, wow. I mean, are we just going around in a loop and just quickly doing our plugs? All right. I mean, it's the highlight of our show, and it's about to be the highlight of yours too, Casey. I hope you know that. Every other episode, every other part of every other episode will pale by comparison. That is just the name of the game. But this is the part of the show where we're going to do some quick plugs. I mean, I'll start us off, I guess. I mean, us three, we love movies, so we all have a letterbox. That's kind of the best place to find us and hear movie thoughts. My letterbox is FOSTH101. Rowan, you go next.
Sure. I'm on Letterboxd and Instagram at Rowan a Boat. You can also find my website where I write about movies. Heath and Foster also write for me occasionally, and I'm running a movie fantasy league out there right now for the spring and summer films. And so every week I do an article, basically an update on the box office, and I editorialize a little bit, talk about the new movies. Fun fact, this is the first week, as of recording, this is the first week where there is no new movie because no one wanted to compete with the Odyssey a week after release. And I think that is a smart choice. But yeah, basically just go there. I write about movies a lot over there. That's knockonwoodfilm.com.
Heath, you're up.
You can find me on Letterboxd. Search Heath Lynch or the One Heath Bar. And if you enjoy listening to our stupid shenanigans today, you can find us at our podcast. Search Franchise Paradiso wherever your podcasts are found, where we debate, argue, and collaborate all kinds of random, innocuous topics regarding franchise films and franchise genres.
Right. Well, let's just dive into the Odyssey discussion, because I've been really excited to talk about it with you guys. I haven't watched your guys' episode of talking about the Odyssey yet, so I am anxious to hear what you guys think about it. Let's go in reverse order. Let's have Foster start, and we can hear what you think about it. And let's do scores out of 10 first, and just kind of like a general thought, and then move on to the next. And we'll
say how many times you've seen it and in what formats too.
Yeah.
So, okay, I saw it twice. The first time I saw it, I was probably at a 9 out of 10. And then the second time I saw it, I would go up to a 10 out of 10. I really, really loved it. I was crazy anticipating the Odyssey. I love Christopher Nolan. I am a Christopher Nolan shill, and I like can't help myself from like turning into middle school Foster whenever I watch one of his movies again. I saw it in IMAX 70 millimeter the first time, and then the second time I saw it in Dolby. Both of them were very good. It's a very good movie.
Awesome. Rowan?
So I have seen it 3 times now, all 3 within the first 36 hours of release. I planned a crazy day and a half around this. The first time, kind of like Foster, I was at a 9 out of 10. And then I thought about it for the couple hours afterward, and I was like, what am I talking about? This is an easy 10, easily one of the best of the year, easily one of the best movies in Nolan's filmography. The first time I saw it in Dolby Cinema. The second time I woke up at 6 in the morning to go see it at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood with some friends in IMAX 70 millimeter. And then later that night, I saw it in regular old rinky-dink IMAX.
What's this?
I'm allowed to have a little fun, Foster.
I've seen it 3 times. I saw it first in 70 millimeter on the Thursday of opening weekend. Friday morning, I went back and saw it in IMAX, not 70 millimeter IMAX, just IMAX. St. Louis doesn't have a 70 millimeter IMAX within hours of it. And then I went back another 4 or 5 days after that, and I saw it in Dolby at an AMC. I am the only one of the 3 who realized this was a 10 out of 10 film right away. It has remained a 10 out of 10 film every time I've seen it. Frankly, if I could rate it higher than 10 out of 10, I would. I think this is a masterpiece of filmmaking, one of the greatest films, not just of Nolan's career or of Greek mythology, but just in the history of film.
You need a Spinal Tap movie rating system.
Yeah, I need an 11. This needs to go to 11.
For sure. Yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 movie. Every time that I've seen it 2 times, and the first time was just in our premium large format at the theater that I go to. I'm not sure exactly what they have or what it is. And the second time was in a 70 millimeter IMAX in Dallas. I drove like 2 hours, all the traffic, all the fun stuff to watch a 3-hour movie. It was an ordeal, but
that would be worth it.
And it was worth it because
I bet Heath would have done that if he could.
If there was one within 2 hours, if there was one within 4 hours of me, I would make that drive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I have a coworker who I just spoke to today, who I will not say the name, but like told me that he spent like a lot of money online buying a ticket so that he could see it in IMAX 70 millimeter at the one I live outside of New York City. So the New York City one for a 2 a.m. showing.
Jeez.
But like the layers of effort that has to take, like you'd have to wait for a train to come home at that point.
Yeah, that's
seeing it at 2 a.m.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's just go into a little bit more of our general thoughts about the movie, what kind of made it great, and a little bit of our history with Greek, like with swords and sandals movies. I mean, I obviously have a pretty deep love of swords and sandals. I started this podcast because I'm a huge Percy Jackson nerd. I read all the books. I've read all the like sequel novels and stuff. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Percy Jackson, but there's like the original 5 books in the series, and then there's an additional like 4-book series, and then there's a spin-off series that covers the Egyptian gods and the Norse gods, and like there's this whole expansive universe. It's all interconnected and everything, and I love all of it. And but the Greek mythology has always been my favorite, and from that I found a love of Greek mythology, and the way that Greek mythology is played in this movie and the questions that it raises about Greek mythology and how the Greek gods themselves affect the world around them, and the fact of how they are woven into the very fabric of the world that they live in is a very interesting point in this movie. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about it as well.
I just have to say before we go any further, I was a huge Percy Jackson kid. And then the world got like a little bit too big for me. Like I love the first series. I love Heroes of Olympus. I started to read, what is it, the Trials of Apollo series? Is that what it's called? And then I kind of fell off that, and I never got into the, is it the Kane Chronicles?
Yeah,
was
the Kane
Egyptian
Chronicles
god?
the Egyptians, yeah.
I was very into that for a while. And then like I think it was probably like middle school was my major like Percy Jackson phase. And I've been watching the series. I have an affinity, like I still love the characters, I still love the world, but I was clearly not as in deep to the whole thing as you. But I was also really into the Dolaire's Book of Greek Myths when I was a kid, so that was kind of my entry point. I devoured that like it was candy. I was just so into it. I was just going like anything I could possibly find. And I'm trying to remember the author's name, but there was a series of graphic novels kind of like adapting the history of Greek mythology, which was a crazy undertaking, but it was like each god got their own like book, and it kind of throughout that series told like as many stories as they could fit within that series, which was also like very foundational to my love of Greek mythology, which was one reason why I was really, one of a bazillion reasons why I was extremely excited for this movie. And to sort of quickly answer your other question, Swords and Sandals movies and like epics, like I say historical in quotes because of course the Odyssey is and always has been a fiction. But like Swords and Sandals epics, I don't have too much of a relationship to those. Like I enjoy all of the ones that I've seen, like obviously some of the best movies of all time, Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, those are like, they're great movies, but that was never my preferred genre in a way. And so I kind of wasn't bringing any baggage on that front going into the Odyssey. I was more attacking it from this will probably be the defining cinematic event of the year. Yeah. Like more from that angle. But I've talked too long. I'll let someone else take the.
Let's go to you, Heath.
I am unfamiliar with Percy Jackson. I do apologize. It just the novels came out after I had already started college, and if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, just my ignorance to the subject matter. But those were more like young adult coded.
Yeah, they're for a younger audience.
I was just not the demographic for it. I'd already passed that. Harry Potter was, I was the perfect age for those, but too old for Percy Jackson. And so I remember the books coming out. I remember the movies coming out, but I never took the time to see them. I probably will someday. Just never did it. But I love Greek mythology.
You can skip the movies. Yeah.
Skip the movies. I literally had the same thought at the same time.
I mean, someone here has made me watch Cars 2 more than once. So
that person will not be named. Wait, more than once? What?
I'd seen it once before, and then someone made me watch it more than once.
All right. Let's not point fingers.
I love Greek mythology. I just think the idea of Greek mythology or Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology is so fascinating. Living in these worlds where there's so many gods and interacting with the gods is not just something that's, I can pray to the gods and they talk to me. No, like these are interactable physical presences within the world, and they imbue magic and all these different things into the world. It's just riveting storytelling. I grew up really watching the original Clash of the Titans, but more specifically the 1960s Jason and the Argonauts with was it Ray Harryhausen, I believe is his name. He did all the visual stop motion special effects.
Skellington.
And if you watch them now with 2026 eyes after going to see Chris Nolan's The Odyssey, you're probably like, this is stupid. This just looks dumb. But man, you watch that as a kid, that was just the craziest thing to me, even in the late 80s, early 90s, let alone if I'd seen that when it came out in the 60s. I'm sure it really blew people's minds. Or even just like Disney's Hercules is just a blast. I've tried to read a lot of the stories throughout the years as well. So this is definitely my jam, my type of genre. I love Sword and Sandals epics, just in general as well. Gladiator is just one of my go-to films that I can put on at any time and just be completely satisfied. And I've been really looking forward to this because not only is this a Greek mythology story, but it's maybe the Greek mythology story. Like the Odyssey is everything. It's the original tome. It's the famous text, this poem passed down for over many millennia. And somehow, after all these years, we've still never gotten a major Hollywood studio production of this film. We've had like TV adaptations or miniseries and stuff, or like small independent things, or maybe foreign films. But like the Warner Brothers, the Universals, these Disneys of the world, they never took on this topic, which is just mind blowing. And then to top it all off with, oh, it's being directed by Christopher Nolan, who's, I don't even think it's arguable at this point. He's just the preeminent director of this generation of filmmakers. There's no one more important to the scope of film as an art form, especially as it comes to translating artistic film to mainstream audiences, than Chris Nolan. It's kind of been his show for the better part of 2 decades now, I would say, since Batman Begins in 2005, and it's only ratcheted up with every film ever since then, outside of like a bomb like Tenet, which isn't even really his fault that it bombed. There's kind of this pandemic, that took the wind out of the sails. And so you're giving me Greek mythology, you're giving me homages to Ray Harryhausen and Gladiator, you're giving me gods and monsters, and you're doing it with the greatest story maybe ever told and the greatest director working today. My anticipation level with this film was off the charts, and it still exceeded all of my anticipation, which is just something so rare that you could find in film today. It was epic. Epic, epic, epic.
So you liked it?
I did. Just
It
a
was
bit.
all right, I suppose.
Yep.
Foster?
Okay, I did read the first 5 Percy Jackson books. I did not read any of the spin-offs because I didn't read them until high school. And if I had read them when I was in middle school, they would have been my favorite things in the world, and I would have absolutely read everything. And I even remember having this feeling. I read them in high school because I felt left out, because I was like, oh my gosh, everyone else was reading these books like a couple of years ago. And then I felt like I was like the guy several years later, like, you guys read these Percy Jackson books? These are really good. But like at the same time, I felt like I just slightly missed the cutoff. I did see Lightning Thief in theaters like 3 times and made my parents come bring me, because at the time it was the best movie ever made. And I have watched the Disney Plus show both seasons. I was never hugely into mythology, but I think it's not for lack of interest. I didn't have a lot of exposure to it. Again, like had the Percy Jackson thing hit me sooner, I absolutely would have been. But the last couple of years, or last year or so, really, I've been trying to read mythology books to kind of prep for this movie. But really, it's just the movie was an excuse for me to read these stories that I had heard about for so long and wanted to actually experience them. And as far as like swords and sandal movies, I mean, I like them for sure. I don't know if it's like a near and dear to my heart genre. The only one that I would say fits that for me is Gladiator. Gladiator is like one of my mom's favorite movies, weirdly. And so I was not allowed to see like super violent movies or whatever when I was younger, except for Gladiator, because my mom liked it. And she's like, we can watch this one. And so like my mom is obsessed with this movie, and she made me memorize my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix legions, like the whole speech. She's like, Foster, you have to memorize this speech. And I'm like, okay. She would like pause it and make me say it. Is it any wonder why I'm into movies now? Like, anyways, yeah. So of course I was pumped for the Odyssey, and I think it's just so cool to see something so fantastical realized in. It's still interesting because like Nolan is still kind of like a gritty, boots on the ground sort of filmmaker. Like even the fantastical elements of the movie have a very earthy kind of quality to them. Like even like the way he does the Cersei scene or the Cyclops scene still feels so like tactile, and like the way he does the gods or doesn't do the gods, in the movie, it's like he's never getting too like ethereal. He's not getting too like, I don't know. Which is interesting. Like, I mean, it obviously works so well for the movie, but it is definitely a take. So I'm almost curious what you would say of, being such a huge mythology fan, like if you wanted more of the gods element of it.
Yeah, I find it really interesting for him to do this kind of take, because at the beginning of the movie, Odysseus is like not a believer in the gods. He makes a couple of marks about, oh yeah, you're gods and your mythology and stuff, especially closer to the beginning of the movie. And then by the end, he is a devout believer to the point where he rides off into exile because of his belief that he has committed these crimes against the gods. And I think that it's so interesting, and I think that the point is that we are meant to question whether or not the gods exist in this world, because so much is done in the name of the gods. Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter to Poseidon for favorable winds and waves. There is so many mentions of Zeus's law. There are so many mentions of all of these different things that are done in the name of the gods. And if the gods don't exist, or if even even if just Zeus's law doesn't exist, there's so much done. Like they hold off from running the suitors out. They do so much. Like even how they confront the Cyclops and stuff is done under the veil of it being because of Zeus's law, and all of it is because of the gods. And if the gods don't exist, which is kind of implied at the end, but not necessarily, like I disagree. I've seen a bunch of different takes on whether or not that's true or not, or whether it was Athena in disguise. It's complicated, but whether or not that is true is the question that the movie is asking, and it's saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't. I don't know if it's necessarily saying this, but one of the things that I took from it was that you should hold your destiny in your own hands. You shouldn't leave it up to fate and chance. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that.
I mean, even the title, I'll be like super quick and then you go, Heath. Like the title, or not the title, sorry, the title card at the beginning, like in a time of apparent magic. Like I think it's very intentional that it's ambiguous about whether the gods actually exist, which is kind of fascinating because like the movie unambiguously has supernatural elements in it. And yet still they're making the gods element kind of ambiguous, especially with the way they do Athena. You can sort of view it in a couple different ways. Yeah, Heath, go ahead.
I was just going to say that for me, I don't even, and this is what makes the film so fascinating, by the way, and makes the text so rich that it's worth having these conversations about. But I don't even know if I agree with the sentiment that he doesn't believe that there's gods at the beginning. I actually found that I think he does believe, and I think that the sacking and burning of Troy is what makes him lose faith. And because any kind of flashback we get between the burning of Troy and the end, when he rediscovers his beliefs and in humanity and his wife and people, and therefore in the gods and the belief of Zeus's law. Yes. And in that part, like post Troy, he doesn't, he, like you said, he says, "You're gods," and whatever. And he tries to spite them all the time, even when he has quote unquote proof, like when he goes to Hades and talks to people. But when we see snippets of scenes from before he goes to Troy, or when he's at Troy, but before they haven't burned it, he speaks of them with reverence. Even when he's talking to Penelope about explaining the Agamemnon sacrifice, or him wanting to wear Penelope's pin of Athena and stuff of that nature. And for me, what I find very interesting is that the whole film also works as a text around the concept of religion and what religion stands for. Whether you view it as indoctrination into an institution that is corrupt, or as a freeing element that can bring truth and love and harmony to the world. The movie has a real fun time playing around with that and using this lens of Greek mythology as to whether or not the gods are real, or they don't exist, or they do exist, to inspect our human nature of, oh, do we want to hold ourselves accountable for our sins, for our beliefs? Is this us? Or are we going to pass blame and say, the gods made me do this? Or because it happened, it was the gods that said it should happen, so therefore it's right. And using that as a moral justification for the inherently awful and outright evil things that happen throughout this movie. And I think that conversation is a big part of what makes the Odyssey so interesting, almost to the point of, to me, it's almost irrelevant as to whether or not the gods exist, because how our human characters are acting is so much more interesting to whether or not Poseidon's going to pop out of the ocean and, like save the day, or, stop the winds from blowing. So at least that's a big part of what I took away from it.
No, I agree with that a lot. Oh man, I guess I'll have to go watch it again and watch the parts before he goes to Troy again, because I might not have picked up on that. So I'll take your word on that one. What did you think, Rowan? What did you think about the gods and ambiguousness there?
I am a huge fan of ambiguity, especially when it comes to faith. I think that stuff is fascinating on screen. To sort of bridge what Heath was talking about, I do think that kind of ties into the overall, like the much broader thematic and I guess also narrative work that the movie is going for, tying it into the collapse of the Bronze Age, which of course in real life was attributed to a number of factors, but we're still, all these thousands of years later, not 100% sure exactly like what was the first one, or like how exactly it happened, because it was so long ago and we have like very few records compared to more recent history. Because in theory, at least if we look to mythology, before that time everything was so focused on the gods, and the gods were essentially like an explanation for why natural things happen. Like that was the origin of the gods in the first place. And this is not textual in the movie necessarily, but as humanity just kept making more and more discoveries, the necessity for such a thing became less, like it just stopped becoming necessary. Contrasting that with today, like modern religion is so different in some ways, but also so similar in other ways. And I'm not sure exactly how much of this Nolan is going for. I think you can read a lot into it, and I think that that's something that's really great about his movies, is that you can really read so far in, and the line of what he's trying to say and what is just a byproduct of this thematic work he's doing, I think is really interesting. And he doesn't seem like he is going to come out and say, here's what I was thinking when I was doing this, because I just think he's a little smarter than that. But tying back into the Zeus's law, like that hangs over this movie pretty heavily, because that is inextricably tied into a faith in the gods. And by the end of the movie, Zeus's law is collapsing in part, because of what Odysseus has done and what his men have done. And like that is the final death of this belief in the gods, like the fall of civilization at the end of the Bronze Age into the first Dark Age. That is like basically the death of the gods as we knew them then, and basically like an usher into a new age of new religion that I think we are like still living in today to a certain extent. So I just think that sort of stuff is fascinating. I've also never been a religious person myself, and so I think that's also why I find it so interesting to sort of look at it with that lens. But yeah, I just really was a fan of everything this movie was doing, and I know that's just a small sliver of it, but I love reading those Greek myths when I was a kid, because it was, even to a child, so clear that like to use an example, like the story of Persephone is an explanation for seasons. And like it is so simple when you think about it, but it must have been simple then to have that explanation. And so it is really like just a matter of perspective. We are looking at these, 3,000 years and some change later, and let's say you brought someone from that age to now, like how would they view our current age? Like it's just so fascinating, and obviously, again, like a sliver of what this movie is going for, but I think it's all really
well. And to tie back into what Foster said earlier, I think it's very distinct that Nolan chose to say a time of apparent magic. He could have very easily said a time of magic, and he chose to put ambiguity just in that opening line. And because of that, it puts unease in our minds of as an audience of what are we seeing is real. And I think it's even more telling that not only is that the opening scroll, that the first thing we see is also Travis Scott singing a poem of these tales of what happened. And really, to me, it's Nolan saying, we don't know what happened. This is a version of a version of a version, etc., going back 3,200 plus years. And this is my version of the tale. And while I may show you Cyril, this rock tentacled monster coming out of a cliff, and while I may show you Circe turning people into pigs, I'm showing a time of apparent magic where the story is saying that this is what these people experienced. It's not necessarily what happened, though. It could have literally been Circe, captured these people, made them eat until they burst and they look like pigs or something. Like we just don't know what that interpretation means. Or maybe when they were trying to escape an actual whirlpool, it threw them off course and they ran into a cliff and several people died in the ship. And that's their explanation for Cyril. Like the whole idea is that this is not found fact literature, that it is up and open to interpretation. I think gives so much leeway to Nolan as an artist to be like, yeah, this could be the gods. Maybe this is Athena. maybe this isn't Athena and this is just a manifestation of Odysseus's guilt. Maybe it is Athena, but it's also a manifestation of Odysseus's guilt, and Athena is choosing to appear to him as someone that he couldn't save. Like, there's so many different interpretations, and the movie is never concrete enough to really give you a definitive answer. The closest thing I feel you could come to it is that the characters that are quote unquote inherently magic or related to the gods in some way. I would say Calypso as the muse, the Cyclops, or Circe. They speak of the gods as if they are real.
Mm-hmm.
The Cyclops speaks of Poseidon as his father. When Calypso is speaking to Odysseus and Zeus strikes thunder, like on multiple occasions, Calypso changes her tune, looks up to the sky and is like, oh crap, he's yelling at me, and starts talking about something else. And Circe, she's like, oh, I can't tell you I don't know the future, but I know truth. And she speaks of truth and says, the gods exist. This is what they've told me, and this is what I see for you. And you need to go to Hades and speak to and the fact that he can go to Hades and speak to the shades of the dead. So I think he's leaning into the fact that the gods are real, because the monsters, who are also mythical creatures, say that the gods are real, but even that's just a theory. There's nothing definitively in the text that proves that. And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I love the fact that he plays with the fact that this was an oral history, and a lot of the news that they get of Odysseus and the news that they get of Troy, all of the news that they get of Troy is oral histories passed back from travelers and from merchants and from everyone. And and Penelope has to cipher through and figure out what of it is true and what of it is false. And she's so smart, and she has a way to figure out what stories actually come from like truthful sources in the Athena pin, but it also, she has to rely on unreliable sources, and the fact that it is an oral history is really cool in that way. What else do you guys want to talk about as far as it? What was what was your guys' favorite action set piece, since you guys are in your action and adventure series right now? What was your guys' favorite action set piece from the movie?
Foster, sling some words.
Well, okay, if we're going action, I don't know if this really counts as action. It's kind of a stretch, but I mean, I'll talk about the actual Trojan horse scene. I thought was incredibly well done, especially just for a story that we all know so well. Like, even if you don't know anything about the Odyssey or about the Iliad, you know about the Trojan horse. It's like it's like a metaphor, analogy that we still use to this day. And it was so visceral to me, like when they are literally in the horse and they are like holding their arms up to the sides to try and keep each other up. And then, of course, the shot of the sword coming down and the guy's shoulder. And then they have to squeegee the blood, off of the sword before it comes out. I just thought that was so tense. It really reminded me of Dunkirk, another Christopher Nolan, movie. Like, it was the same vibes, except transposed to, the ancient Greece.
Why hide in boat when can hide in wooden horse?
If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. And I also just love like the silence of, Odysseus climbing down out of the horse. I think it's so effective. It's so tense. And then that leads into like an actual legit action set piece too, especially with Agamemnon with his big boy armor, standing in the middle, doing his Darth Vader impression, like as the Greeks are pouring into Troy, I think is so incredible and like thematically resonant for what it's saying about Agamemnon and about the Greeks, and it's sort of I suppose a radical take on the sack of Troy, that it's like framed. I mean, maybe I guess it's not radical. I don't know, but it is framed quite negatively, I think, as it looks on the Greeks and their decision. Whereas I think something like Troy, it's like Paris and Hector and Priam and all of them, they're the obvious bad guys because they started this whole thing by taking Helen. But like this movie looks at it quite different. Yes, yes. I did mean that. I'm sorry. My mistake.
Use his proper name. Come on.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Rowan?
Well, so I don't know if you guys saw Avatar Fire and Ash in IMAX last December. They did attach like half of that scene to like the IMAX screen that I saw, and I was like blown away when I first saw that scene. And it was only up until they opened the gates, and then it was cut off. But that was, I mean, that is certainly one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I will shout out. I'm going to be the one to shout out Odysseus just absolutely destroying the suitors at the end of the
Murking
movie.
them.
Exactly. Action like that, like hand-to-hand combat, I don't think has ever really been one of Christopher Nolan's like filmmaking strong suits.
Agreed.
But I think this scene was I think the fact that it is near the end of the movie and that we are carrying all of the baggage and the emotion and the weight of everything that has happened so far with us as we get to this scene, I think that's a pretty major part of it. But also the scene is just like really well choreographed and also really funny with Robert Pattinson in the corner screaming at everyone to grab the swords, grab the swords, grab the shields, as he just like stands there shouting. And like, it is yet another reason to like root for Odysseus. Like, yeah, like he really is that guy. Like he's been kind of built up, and we saw him during the Trojan War, but even during the sacking of Troy, he's not really like, he's not fighting a lot of people. Like he does fight some people in Menelaus's Trojan horse flashback, but in the actual sacking of Troy, he's not really doing much. And this is the first time we really get to see him like fully let loose. We get a little bit of that in the temple earlier. But this is the Odysseus that we have been hearing about the whole movie. This is why Agamemnon wanted him to go to Troy. He is a cunning warrior. He's very smart. And he's also just a great fighter. And so this is him finally showing us, the audience, who he actually is beyond the intelligence. We've seen the intelligence. That's the Trojan horse. This is like the brute strength. And honestly, like, it's violent and it's a little disturbing, but I just really loved how it was shot. And also, I don't know about your guys' theater, the second 2 times I saw it, the audience burst into spontaneous applause when he shoots the arrow into Corey Hawkins' neck, and him thrumming the bow as well. Just truly like some all-timer Nolan moments in there. So I was like, I wasn't literally doing this, but I felt like hooting and hollering throughout.
The stringing of the bow, and then plucking the string, that will be in movie montage clips for years, for decades.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is just one of the greatest and like 3-second hype up cool moments I've ever seen in film. Yeah, I think it's pretty undeniable that the Massacre of the Suitors is the best action piece. I would agree with what Rowan said. I don't think Nolan's actually the best at shooting action. I think his editing in particular gets a bit wonky. He's been doing this since Batman Begins, where he does way too many cuts at almost to a disorienting level, especially in the geographical sense of the room or the area that he's fighting in. It's not like MCU Marvel bad, but it's not that great either. But what he does do effectively is he captures the energy and the tone of the scene very well, so that even if it's not entirely coherent what's happening on the screen, you're still fully invested in everything that it's delivering. My favorite segments, though, is probably what I'd say, because kind of like what Foster was saying earlier, it's not, I mean, it is an action adventure story. It's more adventure than action.
Yeah.
But the best scenes, let's just call them segments, or the trials of Odysseus, are the more horror aspect ones. The Cyclops is scary, and that scene is really tense. And Hades is petrifying. And it, especially when they're like, okay, all these shades are going to, yeah, they're, and
You better bring out your mandrakes.
Yep.
Yes.
My favorite scene is easily Cersei, though. I think the Cersei scene is just incredible. A big reason why, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name now.
Because you hate men.
Samantha Morton.
True.
Yeah. Samantha Morton is just absolutely tremendous as Cersei. Next level good. I want the Best Supporting Actress campaign to start for her now. I think she's just stunningly amazing in that film, in that scene. And the tone that she sets for that atmosphere, the tension between her and Matt Damon as they're just sitting at the table and talking, and he's holding like the meat to his mouth. And you know he's not going to eat it if you know the story at all, or just how movies work in general. Like, because obviously if he eats it, okay, then the movie's just done. That doesn't work. But Nolan still tricks you. He still gives you the sense of, oh my God, this is all going to go wrong. And that takes a real certain understanding of patience, of timing, of focus, and credit as well to Ludwig Göransson for knocking the score out of the park. We haven't really talked about that yet, but just throughout the entire movie, the score is incredible. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the sirens scene. It's maybe 2 or 3 minutes long. It is probably the shortest quote unquote trial segment of the film, but it's maybe the highest elevated segment that is in the entire film. The way Matt Damon so poetically, so torturously describes what it was like to hear the song. I think that was one of the smartest decisions, is that we don't ever hear it, because the idea of a siren song through legend, through thousands of years of storytelling, nothing they ever played could have lived up to what's in our heads. Like nothing in the world could, because there would have always been people that are like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good song, but that's not what I imagine. That's not what would drive me.
It's like
to
writing
madness.
a hit song for a movie where people write a song and it becomes a hit. It's got to be good.
So
they should have gotten Salika Night Shyamalan from M. Night Shyamalan's Trap to do the soundtrack for this one too, just for the siren song. Just like, wait, is that M. Night Shyamalan's daughter?
Nah, it's the K-pop Demon Hunters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, me unplugging the wax from my ears and swimming as fast as I possibly can.
But to give the whole scene from Himesh Patel's perspective, with the muted audio of the wax, it's just so smart, and I was just like floating in my chair during that scene. It's just awesome.
This whole siren song is a trap.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's a trap. That's awesome. I don't know if you guys have. I don't know how familiar you guys are with it, but there was an indie musical that came out a couple of years ago called Epic, and it also follows the story of the Odyssey. And if you guys want a thrill, put on just the song called Odysseus, and it's the part where he is taking down all of the suitors and everything. And the thrum, I've been on TikTok a lot lately, and just the part of him hitting the thrum and then going through and taking out all the suitors set to that song has been all over my For You page recently, because it is just an absolute compliment to it. And yeah, that's the best action scene in the movie. But like you said, there are so many other great parts of the movie. I think the Cyclops scene is so visceral and so compelling, and it has sparked a lot of conversations about, should Nolan do a full out horror movie? And
please do.
I would say yes.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Yes. He
Short
should.
answer, yes. Long answer, also yes.
Also, yes, please, man. Well,
I did listen to Epic the musical. I had a fairly long commute for a job last year, and so I took a couple of days to listen through the whole thing. And Heath and Foster, as people who enjoy musicals, if you guys haven't checked it out, I think you should. It's like all of, Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's all of the Iliad and the Odyssey, right?
It's just the Odyssey. So
just the Odyssey. Okay.
The author is working on the Iliad part of it right now, but he had a great idea for the Odyssey part of it, and so he just kind of worked through that.
And in theory, Jerry Bruckheimer is adapting it into, I believe, an animated movie. I might be wrong on that, which is how it should be done. But it is truly a S-tier concept album material. So strong recommend to anyone listening to check that.
For sure. Rowan and Foster, did you guys have any other set pieces that you want to talk about, or any other scenes or segments that you wanted to talk about that weren't strictly action scenes?
Foster, you got anything?
Well, I will say there is one other action scene. The Lystragonian scene, I think, is really is quite fun. And I like the choice to make them just big knights, basically. I think it's fun.
Remind me of the Knights Who Say Knee from Monty Python, but in a scary way.
Someone should edit it so whenever they slash someone with the sword, there's just a knee sound.
I also like trees that move. That was fun.
That was cool.
That was fun. Yeah. Aside from action scenes, I think the movie is surprisingly emotional, especially as we go forward, in that last third. When, for me, I think aside from plucking the bow and all that, which is sort of the obvious height, but I feel like the most emotional, maybe my favorite scene is Tom Holland's recognizing Odysseus as his father. Is such a good scene, because with the dog, and you know exactly what's going to happen the moment he walks past the dog, and then it happens, and then you're like, yes, I'm still crying even though I knew it was going to happen. And then I just think I don't know, it's so moving because you realize like, oh yeah, Telemachus really doesn't know what his dad looks like because, I mean, stupid comment I'm about to make. There's like no phones or anything. There's no photographs of people. You're just, it's literally like it could be any guy, you know? And so like the pain and the heartbreak of, you know, going about life and just like, you know, you might see some old guy and just like have a thought in your head, I wonder, you know, like that could be him. That could be him. It's probably been like 20 years of pain, you know? And man, I feel like they both nailed that scene. And it also just, it really sets up well, I think, the eventual bow plucking and everything. Like when somebody get these beggars out of here, you know, and like someone had to do it. And like when they're all being mean to Odysseus, and then you see Tom Holland just stewing with his little angry, I'm a serious actor face, you know, and it's like, it's so good though. They nail it. Like the ending works, I think, because of those more emotional elements. Anne Hathaway, I want Odysseus. That's what she wants.
I don't want them. I want Odysseus. I want my husband.
Yeah.
I've seen people criticizing that, like that aspect of her character. Like,
That's
I think
so good,
it is a well-known thing that Christopher Nolan can't really write good female characters. I think that is just like a thing that we can all accept. Interstellar, I would say, is like the big exception. But
I would
do you
say
like Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer?
Oppenheimer,
I still don't think he's fully cracked
She's
it.
got like one of the best scenes, I feel, in Oppenheimer.
Yeah, she does.
True.
I still don't think he's fully cracked it, but I do think the trio of his best female characters is, I actually think Penelope here, Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer, and then Anne Hathaway in Interstellar.
It's just rank Nolan's women. Just
I'm trying to give props to these are the times he's done better.
Yeah,
but he still has more to do, though. To Rowan's point, he can still
I do think this is the best, like cumulatively the best, like collect. You know, even though this is a real boy movie, like this is, you know, he does have Penelope, he does have Cersei. I mean, Samantha Morton is not in the movie very much, but she is just straight up incredible. And I've seen people, you know, we don't have to get into the discourse, but one of the zillion brain dead takes on this movie I've seen on the internet is like Penelope is, you know, she's just a woman written in service of a man, and that's her whole thing. And like I like the whole time I was watching those scenes, I'm like, this is her husband and the love of her life. Like, I don't think that's such a crazy thing to, you know, to portray. It's also very true. I think she has much more agency here than she does in the poem. Yeah. Like, truly, like, I love the scene where she's talking to Telemachus, basically telling him, like, I've sat on the throne for 20 years.
I've been ruling.
Exactly. Like, I've probably been ruling just as long, if not longer, than Odysseus was ever, like, ruling Ithaca. Like, it truly, like, she deserves that. And the fact that she wasn't recognized for 20 years is, like, I totally understand. And, you know, it's just a byproduct of, like, the age that she lives in. And I love that Nolan brought in, I guess this is also part of the broader conversation, is, like, kind of the modernization of a lot of concepts and dialogue in this movie that I think is honestly necessary for this movie to work in the way it does and to have as much appeal as it does for casual audiences. Because people being like, they're not speaking they're not speaking in Greek, and like, they're, you know, who gives a shit? Like, they're speaking in English because it's an American movie.
I go back to what I said at the beginning. This is Nolan's interpretation of the story.
Right.
It is a story that has been told and retold millions of times. It is his interpretation. You may not agree with it, but don't say like, oh, it's objectively wrong. The whole story then is objectively wrong if that's your definition. No one knows what the happened 3,200 years ago when all these events took place.
When they were telling this story in the Middle Ages, they would have used the parlance of the time, just as we are using the parlance of the time to tell it now. And honestly, I do think, like, if you're going to cast like Matt Damon and Tom Holland and Anne Hathaway and Robert Pattinson, like these actors who are inherently very modern, like we have seen them do, like we as the audience have seen them do all of these like extremely modern movies. We know how they talk. We have this relationship with them. If they had been speaking like some kind of archaic language, even like a very old version of English, it would have been so much harder to connect to them as characters. I feel like the only person who can really do that well is Robert Eggers, because he really knows how to cast people who can do that really well. But like, if you're gonna have like, you know, Matt Damon, who honestly like has kind of that modern look. Sounds like he's from Boston. Like, I do think that that is the right way to do it. And Heath, like you were saying, this is Nolan's interpretation of the Odyssey, just like we've had, thousands and thousands of personalized interpretations of this story over the millennia. This just so happens to be in an age when, Christopher Nolan is this extremely popular and wide-ranging creative voice who can reach more people than ever before with this story. Which I think is great. Like it is only good for storytelling. Like in the lineage of this Travis Scott character from this movie, this bard that is spreading this story, we're still doing that. We're still telling stories. It's just with very different mediums. And I think that is another thing that Nolan's trying to get at, is that like this is a story that will continue, even beyond this movie. This is just his version of that. And I'm so glad that we get to live in the era where we get that.
That's awesome. One thing that I want to talk about, bouncing back to Anne Hathaway's Penelope, the one thing that I really missed in this story, that Nolan obviously had to cut out a lot in this story. There was a lot of things that you just cannot put into this story. The Odyssey is a giant story, so you obviously can't put everything. But I really miss the part of the Odyssey where Penelope doesn't recognize Odysseus when he comes back from the adventure. I think that could, and you get a little bit of that, but I really enjoy that part of the Odyssey. And obviously, again, there's reasons why you cut everything out, and it's part of Nolan's story that he's telling. But I think that could have fit really well into this version of the story, is having Penelope not be able to recognize him, because he has changed and he has become this different person over his journey and weary and years.
Yep, agreed.
Any last thoughts from you guys before we hop off of here?
I'll go into at least the part of the movie that I think elevated this above just a great film that would have been a 4 out of 5, like highly recommend, but maybe not earth-changing film, to no, this is a totemic masterpiece of cinema for me. And that is the recontextualization, and I believe Foster and I have talked about this, and Rowan too, but Foster specifically, of the recontextualization of the fall of Troy and what that means to Odysseus. And you could make an argument again, oh, that's not what was in the original text. They never cared about this, or all the stupid, as Rowan said, brain dead takes online of, oh, you're trying to make this story woke. I don't know what to tell you. It makes the story better. And going back to what we've said time and time again, stories are up for interpretation. Sorry if that bothers you, but his understanding of the breaking of Zeus's law, and that he is the reason that the law is broken, and he is the reason why decency is fading and compassion and understanding is crumbling and eroding, and that humanity is dying, is because of him and what he did to break Zeus's law and invade Troy to commit some of the most horrific crimes that have ever been committed. If I was to ding the movie for anything, I think the movie even could have gone further in the scene of Troy, of explicitly showing some of those horrors. It leads a lot up to imagination. At no point really in this whole movie is there even like blood. Like when people get beheaded or something, you see the swing of the sword and then it cuts away. Like
it's a very
there's just
soft R rating, which I think
it was very soft R. I outside of some language, and maybe I guess some people get creeped out if you get turned into a pig. I would say this should be PG-13. In fact, there's more blood in the Hades scene of them just drinking blood than there is blood throughout all the action throughout the rest of this movie. Like it just is non-existent. But that recontextualization of the burning of Troy, and how the movie very wisely, how Nolan very smartly tells us the story from Menelaus's perspective earlier, and we get the hiding in the horse and all the way up to the opening of the gate. And then it cuts, because for Menelaus, that's all that mattered, because he is the pig that Cersei describes. He's a warrior. That's just who he is. He's mindless. He's violent. And he didn't think about it any further than that. But Odysseus does, because he is the creative, compassionate, intelligent soul that Agamemnon recruited and pretty much forced to leave Ithaca to go on this war because he knew he would need a mind like Odysseus's. So when we see the story again later from Odysseus's perspective, when the gates open, that's not where the story ends anymore. We see the fallout from that, and we see it through his eyes, and just the pure, overwhelming, simultaneous sense of terror and regret. And just that one of those rare moments that we've all had them in our life where in the moment you recognize this was a mistake, not something you reflect on later in life where you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. And it's already too late. I can't turn it back. This could be as simple as you say something stupid in a conversation, and right after the words leave your lips, you slip up in your head. You're like, God, I should have never said that. That was dumb. Or to bigger ramifications and actions in our lives. And Odysseus's sin is maybe the greatest sin in recorded history of humanity at this point, and it leads to the complete deconstruction of decency and understanding and civilization. And while some of the lines of dialogue might be a little bit ham-fisted, especially at the end when they're sailing away to the west, and Anne Hathaway literally says, I think something like, "Well, civilization, we can build it again," or something like that. That doesn't take away from the fact that when Odysseus is telling this story to Penelope, and he is confessing that he is the people from the sea, which then recontextualizes the entire film, which I don't know if I've ever had a second watch recommendation more than the Odyssey. One, just because the film's brilliant and it's fun to experience. But two, once you go into it knowing that that is the interpretation that Nolan is providing, and you hear all the references of the people from the sea and the death of humanity and how civilization is crumbling throughout the film, and you realize that's Odysseus's fault, the whole movie takes on a new life for me. And every time I've seen this, at that scene where he's explaining to Penelope why he could never return home and why he thinks he is just the worst person in existence, it brings me to tears. I just think it's beautiful screenwriting, some of the most powerful thematic work that Nolan has ever done. And in our world where we are today, I think it's a very important lesson that we need to be compassionate. We need to be understanding, and we need to respect each other. We may not agree with everyone. You're allowed to have disagreements, but we are losing our humanity, and we need to be better. And it's at that point that the movie really transcended and became like a 5 out of 5 masterpiece. And then after that scene, that's when you get the massacre of the suitors. So you're just like, oh my God, I just got like thematically wrecked. I'm emotionally devastated. And then you give me one of the most hyped up action moments of this decade, maybe of this millennium, so just an amazingly powerful ending to a film. One of those rare films that actually gets better and better as the film is going. It's so cool. So there's my big reason why this was so special to me.
I think what you mentioned, like that gorgeous, and like, I'm glad you talked about that scene. But like that, I think really more than makes up for some of the more ham-fisted, like hokier lines that Nolan throws in there. Cause that's just Christopher Nolan. Like he does have, he has strengths as a screenwriter, and he has things that don't necessarily always come together. But his thematic, like those strokes are just so much more, like they hit so hard that I'm willing to forgive like some lines of dialogue that are a little bit too much on the nose, because like they might bother some people. Those just don't bother me nearly.
Yep, agreed. He does so much other great work that I can shrug off some of those goofier lines.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Foster, do you have thoughts? I know that you've spoken to me about how that scene was important to you as well.
Well, I mean, I feel like you already kind of gave your whole sermon, so I don't want to. I would just repeat the stuff you said, anyways. I'll just say, like, to
child,
like closing wrap up thoughts. I guess I just think I think there's a real hunger for movies like this, and by movies like this, I'm just meaning big, large scale, shot on real locations, fantasy, sci-fi epics. Stuff like we used to get a lot 15, 20 years ago with Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, Harry Potter, those kind of movies. And I think, comparing the Odyssey to the Avengers Doomsday trailer that just came out, where like so much of that does just look like it was shot on a green screen, and you kind of get the feeling that like the actors aren't even in the same room as each other sometimes. I do think it just highlights like a hunger for this kind of a movie. And I think the fact that all of a sudden everyone is just becoming like an aspect ratio snob all of a sudden, like it's just like the weirdest timeline to me. But
I've had friends that see one movie a year, maybe coming up to me and asking, okay, which format do I need to see this in? It's so cool. I love it. It's such a fun conversation.
And I feel like the lesson that should be learned from Hollywood is like, A, just make good movies, but B, like commit the money to the right place. It like doesn't all need to be, like post-production VFX that you slap onto a movie that was like so to begin with. You want to build something really awesome. And I feel like this is a movie that's going to last forever because there's not any part of it that I at least visually, there's not any part of it that's going to age poorly. It's like, this looks absolutely incredible. Yeah. And it's just exciting. I want more movies like this. I mean, the only other one I can think of coming out this year is like Dune Part 3. I feel like is going to deliver on that level, especially like, I don't know. I assume you guys probably saw the opening thing before in IMAX. Oh my gosh. I'm just like, I just start crying.
Yeah. That's my only thought is like, make Dune not Doomsday, because it's made the right way. Like you hear them talk about how they had to build roads out into the desert to make Dune, and I can't imagine Disney doing anything like that for Doomsday.
Yeah,
we had to build roads to the soundstage.
Speaking of Disney, it's an apt comparison that this cost $250 million reportedly to make. And just a couple of weeks before, the live action Moana movie came out that cost $250 million to make.
Excuse me.
And they're night and day difference. And we make the joke at the top of our podcast, movie studios aren't making more original content these days. That joke is about literally this exact sentiment. Like, we're not stupid. We know they are making original films, but the amount of money that percentage-wise they are investing into franchise slop like the live-action Moana remake versus giving it to inspired, creative auteur voices like a Christopher Nolan that can make something like the Odyssey. And I understand not everyone's Christopher Nolan, and they're not going to make the Odyssey every time, but we can do stuff like again, just this year, Denis Villeneuve is making Dune Part 3. Earlier this year, we had Project Hail Mary. Last year, one of the biggest films of the year was Sinners. Like,
we got Obsession this year.
Ryan Coogler knocked it out of the park. You can do this. Give the money needed to the right people to make original stuff, or maybe not original, since that Project Hail Mary is not original because that was based off a book. And at this point, Dune is certainly not original. It's part of a franchise. But like, to Foster's point, at least make the big scale, large budget blockbusters, but put talent behind it, real talent, and people will go see it. Like they will. And we don't always need this seventh entry in a franchise.
I think there is a line between, like Dune is technically not part of a franchise. Project Hail Mary is based on a book. Odyssey is based on a poem. But I do think there is a lot, like a very clear line that I think even the casual theater goer can see.
Yes.
Between a movie like this and a live action Moana or Avengers Doomsday or like the seventh entry of like a shitty like action franchise.
Fast and the Furious 11 comes
Fast and
out.
the Furious.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I do think even the most casual theater goer can see that like the Odyssey, Dune, like these are movies that you are excited about because there is the potential that it will be good. I think if you went out, to a rando on the street and said like, which movie would you be more excited for, this or this? Like, they are going to choose more towards the Odyssey, more towards Dune, more towards like Project Hail Mary, because we are getting movies like this that are so good that it is setting the expectation, and that makes movies like Avengers look really like just so much worse, and Moana just so much worse by comparison, which I think is good. I think that's only good for the film going culture.
Suck it, House of Mouse.
Guys. Well, I think that's probably going to wrap up the episode for today. Thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. My name is Casey. This is the Oracle Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok, and anywhere that you get your podcasts. Be sure follow all of these guys on Letterboxd, and be sure to listen to the Franchise Paradiso podcast, as well as read all of their fabulous writing at sitpopgot.com and at knockonwood.com as well.
Knockonwoodfilm.com.
Film.com. Okay, sorry.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no. I couldn't get knockonwood.com, unfortunately.
son of a
I
gun.
would have if I could.
That's funny. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been the Oracle Podcast, and that has been your prophecy.